Good morning, Congressmen and women. This is the Progressive Alliance for Reform, also known as PAR, and we are a political interest group here to lobby for change within the House and the Senate to promote the rights and well-being of Americans. We stand before you, given the pleasure and privilege of representing the ongoing issues of gender inequality that plague our society. Throughout history, men have been given much more exposure than women, in all fields, such as technology, arts, agriculture, medicine, and many others. This phenomenon, known as the male default, will be our main topic of discussion. This afternoon, we at PAR aim to create change by persuading you all to change your perception of inequality and the language or actions used to perpetuate these issues. An underlying, systematic bias in society and everyday lives is responsible for how men are given the default, correct, or convenient choice in various contexts. While Americans have come a long way in women's rights, from education to voting to healthcare, the outright discrimination against women and barriers to entry are primarily gone. However, gender inequality and sexism are still fundamental problems in American society. The under the hood systematic bias in many systems drives these inequalities, such as the gender pay gap, access to healthcare, gender bias in education, and lack of political representation. These biases originate in the most basic forms of self-expression and identity. Language. The English language has existed since the 5th century, originating in northwestern Germany, southern Denmark, and the Netherlands, by Anglo-Saxon migrants. This language, created over a millennium ago, is a driving force in perpetuating inequality, injustice, and ultimately, the unequal opportunities that men and women are exposed to. The male default, a systematic structural bias making men a default in various contexts, originates in the generic masculine grammatical preference that connotes a strong indication of a masculine ideal. This, male unless otherwise indicated, thinking permeates society and influences the way we think. Proponents of traditional generic masculines often believe that the words he or man, according to the dictionary, point to men, but in reality, most everyone assumes the speakers are referring to all individuals. This way of thinking is untrue, and most of your voter base would not like you entertaining these ideals. Instead, these so-called gender-neutral words are read as overwhelmingly male. Words that come up in everyday language, such as mankind, man-made, the phrase, all men are created equal, manpower, congressmen, and businessmen, conjure images of individuals who are all, or almost all men, as supported by numerous studies when compared to genuinely gender-neutral variants. Numerous studies have researched the psychological impact the generic masculine has on men and women. In studies where subjects were asked to draw individuals based on their profession, individuals drew pictures of men in those roles when the generic masculine was used. Over 80% of the pictures were of male doctors, scientists, lawyers, teachers, and firefighters. However, individuals tasked with drawing these professions drew around the same number of men and women when questionnaires used gender-neutral language. The generic masculine refers to a male-centric world. When that is translated into the real world, individuals are more likely to recall famous men, suggest male candidates, and, worst of all, estimate a profession as male-dominated, as we will discuss shortly. Worst of all, when the generic masculine is used in job advertisements or on job applications, women perform much worse in interviews and are much less likely to even apply because of the inherent male-centric implication. When used in questionnaires, women's responses also vary significantly from those of women who were given questionnaires of gender-neutral language. This leads to a type of metadata bias where some patterns that are not present between men and women emerge, and others that are concealed, further exacerbating the issues with the generic masculine's association with male words. This language bias only shapes our expectations of ourselves and others. Douglas Hofstadter, an English philosopher, criticizes the English language's use of the generic masculine satirically. Hofstadter replaces masculine words with racial words. For example, mankind turns into whitekind, man-made becomes white-made, and the phrase, all men are created equal, becomes, all whites are created equal. Even still, the phrase manpower directly translates to white power. It would be absurd to expect people of color to feel included, akin to ignoring the consequences such language would inevitably create. Interestingly, the generic masculine can also be looked at through an international lens. According to the World Economic Forum, gender-inflected, natural gendered, and genderless language does not follow the usual patterns of sexism in language. Countries with gender-inflected language, prominently displaying masculine or feminine ideals, are the most unequal. However, countries with genderless languages, such as Hungarian and Finnish, have the highest levels of inequality. In contrast, countries with natural gendered languages, such as English, where words are not encoded with a gender, have the lowest levels of gender inequality. The study concluded that this is because, in English, gender is often specified as an adjective to a noun. In contrast, in genderless language, as the saying goes, because men go without saying, it matters when women literally can't get said at all. Marilyn Frye, a philosopher and author known for her work on feminist theory, views gender inequality as a birdcage, where each rod is an issue perpetuating such inequalities. For example, the gender pay gap would be one, as well as other issues such as access to healthcare or treatment in the workplace. Frye views language as an issue that should be at the forefront of your and your fellow politicians' gender-focused policies. This is because everyone can address the language issue, take action right now, and create an environment that proactively signals their commitment to women. With these changes to your speeches, campaign advertisements, and in interactions with voters, you are also proudly signaling to your voters your commitment to women, which, at the very least, half your voter base cares deeply about. If we can change the way politicians speak, then this creates the new, politically correct way of speaking, which will then redefine our standard and formal means of convention. If, from a top-down level, we can rid ourselves of these default language biases, we can start to create lasting and real change today. The best part about this approach is that it can start today, rather than the pesky bills that take weeks of processing and review, a process that we at the Progressive Alliance for Reform know you all too well. To conclude our message, we believe that these simple changes in language will begin to lead to the necessary societal lengths of reform in the United States of America, and if it doesn't, at the very least, your constituents will know you respect the rights and representation of all people, and will surely be more inclined to want you back in office. We are the Progressive Alliance for Reform, and we approve this message.